The colonel's laughter cut through the firing range as he watched her hands shake. Her fingers trembled against the weapon, betraying her with every movement. "Perhaps administrative duties would be more suitable for your condition," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. The other instructors smirked while recruits looked away uncomfortably. She didn't respond, just focused on steadying her breathing. When he stepped closer to continue his mockery, something caught his eye. The dog tags around her neck were blackened, edges warped by intense heat. His face transformed as recognition dawned. Those burn patterns matched the ones from the forward base fire. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of quiet courage and hidden truth resonate with you, consider subscribing for more untold tales of extraordinary individuals who changed history without seeking glory. The training hall at Fort Halcyon hummed with the steady drone of fluorescent lights. Lieutenant Briar Reeves stood at the firing line, shoulders square despite the visible tremors running through her hands as she attempted to load her weapon. The shaking was pronounced, her fingers betraying her with each careful movement as she struggled to insert the magazine. Colonel Harlan Mercer watched from the sidelines, eyes narrowing with obvious disapproval. His recent appointment as base commander had been accompanied by whispers of his uncompromising standards and zero tolerance for anything less than perfection. He moved through the line of trainees with crisp efficiency, assessing each with cold precision. "Lieutenant," he called out, voice deliberately loud enough to draw attention, "is this your first time handling a firearm?" The question carried unmistakable condescension. Several nearby trainees glanced over, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and curiosity. "No, sir," Briar replied quietly, not looking up from her task. "Just a bad day." Mercer's eyebrows rose. "A bad day? The enemy will not care about your bad days, Lieutenant. Neither does this facility." The training room fell silent as all eyes turned to witness the public dressing down. Briar remained focused on her weapon, the trembling in her hands seemingly worse under the spotlight of attention. Her face betrayed nothing, no embarrassment, no anger, only absolute concentration. "This," Mercer announced to the room at large, gesturing toward Briar, "is what happens when we lower standards to accommodate individuals who clearly are not suited for field operations." Several instructors nodded in agreement, while trainees avoided eye contact. The public humiliation crossing the line from tough training into something more personal. Yet, Briar showed no reaction, her face composed despite the colonel's escalating criticism. Around her neck hung standard-issue dog tags, worn outside her uniform, contrary to regulation. The tags themselves appeared darkened, edges uneven, as though they had been through something the rest of her pristine uniform had not. This small detail, easily overlooked amid the confrontation, hinted at a history not immediately apparent. As she finally prepared to fire, her weapon jammed with a distinctive click. Mercer's theatrical sigh carried throughout the range. "Perhaps administrative duties would be more suitable for your condition, Lieutenant," he suggested with mock concern. "I am sure we can find you a desk where trembling hands will not endanger your colleagues." Rather than respond to the provocation, Briar calmly cleared the jam with surprising expertise, her fingers moving through the process with practiced precision despite their instability. The contrast between her technical proficiency and physical limitations created a subtle question in the minds of those watching. How could someone so clearly experienced with weapons be struggling with basic motor control? Sergeant Major Naomi Halstead entered the range, observing the interaction with narrowed eyes. After Mercer moved on to critique another trainee, she approached Briar's station. "Need any assistance, Lieutenant?" she asked, voice neutral but eyes assessing. "I will manage, Sergeant Major," Briar replied without looking up. "Always have." Halstead's gaze dropped to the dog tags hanging outside Briar's uniform, slight recognition flickering across her face. "Those tags are non-regulation." "Yes, ma'am. Special dispensation." Something in those simple words caused Halstead's demeanor to shift subtly, professional distance warming slightly. "Carry on, Lieutenant. Take all the time you need." Throughout the morning, the pattern continued. While other instructors pushed trainees with standard tough but fair approaches, Mercer returned repeatedly to Briar's station. His criticism increasingly pointed in public, yet she maintained her composure, methodically completing each task despite her physical limitations, never responding to provocations or offering explanations. Other trainees began noticing the disparity in treatment, exchanging confused glances and whispered comments when Mercer was out of earshot. "What is his problem with her?" one whispered. "She is keeping pace despite whatever is wrong with her hands." "Maybe they have history." "No way. She just got transferred here last week." Outside, dark clouds gathered as a thunderstorm approached Fort Halcyon. Lightning occasionally flashed through the high windows, followed by distant rumbles. The power fluctuated once, emergency lights briefly activating before the main system resumed. During one particularly close lightning strike, Breyer visibly tensed, dropping momentarily into a defensive position before recovering her composure. The reaction was subtle but unmistakable, something beyond normal storm anxiety. Mercer, ever vigilant for weakness, noticed immediately. "Combat stress, Lieutenant? Another reason to reconsider your placement in this program." The symbolic motif emerged, reflected in both the unstable lighting and Breyer's trembling hands. Things that appear broken may function in ways not immediately apparent, and surfaces often conceal depths worth exploring. The flickering lights cast shifting shadows across the range, creating a visual echo of the mysteries surrounding the quiet lieutenant. For the final assessment of the day, trainees were required to complete a timed weapon assembly and target engagement. Mercer announced he would personally time Breyer, standing unnecessarily close as she prepared. "Let us see how far behind standard you really are, Lieutenant," he stated loudly enough for others to hear. Her hands shook worse under the direct scrutiny, but her movements showed muscle memory that contradicted basic training protocols. She completed the assembly using techniques not taught in standard courses, adaptations clearly developed to compensate for her tremors. Mercer checked his stopwatch, momentary confusion crossing his features. "That is adequate," he conceded reluctantly, clearly having expected failure. As the day concluded, the storm outside intensified. Lightning flashed more frequently, and with a final electrical surge, the power failed completely. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, bathing the range in dim red lighting that created an almost underwater effect. Shapes and faces transformed in the crimson glow. Breyer reached for her gear bag, preparing to leave with the others. As she moved, her dog tag swung forward, catching Mercer's attention. In the red emergency lighting, something about the metal became more visible, the blackened edges and warped surfaces revealing damage that suggested exposure to extreme heat. "Lieutenant," Mercer called, curiosity temporarily overriding contempt. "Where did you get those tags?" Breyer paused, turning toward him with measured control. "From the fire, sir." "What fire?" Lightning illuminated the range through the high windows, casting momentary bright light across Breyer's face. In that flash, faint scarring along her jawline became visible, previously hidden by shadows and her habitually downturned face. "Forward base Indigo, sir," she replied quietly. 3 years ago, yesterday." The effect of those simple words was immediate and profound. Mercer's face drained of color, recognition, and something like shock replacing his previous disdain. "Indigo?" he repeated, voice suddenly stripped of authority. "That is not possible. There were no survivors at Indigo." The first mystery deepened. Who exactly was Lieutenant Breyer Reeves, and how had she survived something officially recorded as having no survivors? The mess hall buzzed with whispers the following morning. Word of the confrontation between Colonel Mercer and the mysterious lieutenant with shaking hands had spread overnight, amplified by the colonel's unexpected reaction to whatever she had said. Breyer sat alone, methodically cutting her food with deliberate concentration. In the natural daylight streaming through the windows, the scarring on her hands was more noticeable, thin white lines crisscrossing her skin like a roadmap of past trauma. 2 senior officers sat at a nearby table, one explaining to the other in hushed tones. "Indigo was classified. Total loss except for 1 person, according to the report. Fire destroyed everything: communications center, barracks, command post." "You think that is her? The ghost from the reports?" "Has to be. Did you see Mercer's face when she mentioned it? Like he had seen a ghost." Their conversation cut off abruptly as Mercer himself entered the mess hall, his usual commanding presence diminished by the dark circles under his eyes. He scanned the room, gaze locking onto Breyer's solitary figure. Without acknowledging the customary greetings from other officers, he walked directly to her table. "Lieutenant Reeves," he said, voice carefully controlled. "Report to my office at 0900. "Yes, sir," she replied without looking up. In his office an hour later, Mercer reviewed personnel files with growing frustration. Breyer's file was unusually thin, large sections redacted or simply missing. Her service record showed a distinguished early career, followed by a blank period of nearly 8 months, then reassignment to training duties with no explanation. Medical records access had been denied without higher clearance, unusual for a commanding officer reviewing personnel under his command. Something about Lieutenant Breyer Reeves had been deliberately obscured, creating the second mystery. What information about her past was being concealed, and by whom? Mercer's aide entered with a folder marked classified. "Sir, I found the Indigo incident report you requested." The colonel opened it eagerly, only to find a heavily sanitized document that provided little beyond basic facts. Forward operating base destroyed by fire, 26 personnel lost, suspected equipment malfunction in the generator building. "This is useless," Mercer muttered. "Where is the full report? Survivor statements? Medical evaluations?" "That is all we have access to, sir," his aide explained. "The rest requires Delta clearance." "Who has Delta clearance at a training facility?" "Just one person, sir, Sergeant Major Halstead." Later that afternoon, trainees gathered for a tactical response scenario in a simulated urban environment. The exercise involved retrieving sensitive materials while responding to various threats. A standard training module designed to evaluate decision-making under pressure. Breyer moved through the course with unexpected expertise despite her physical limitations. Her approach to clearing rooms, identifying threats, and securing objectives demonstrated techniques well beyond basic training protocols. She employed adaptive methods that compensated for her trembling hands, maintaining accuracy and efficiency despite her obvious disability. When the simulation incorporated fire elements, flashing red, lights, and artificial smoke, she hesitated momentarily, a flash of something like fear crossing her features. Yet she recovered almost instantly, executing a textbook-perfect procedure for civilian extraction under fire conditions. Other trainees watched from the observation area, their expressions shifting from initial skepticism to growing respect. Mercer observed as well, his earlier mockery replaced by intense scrutiny, analyzing every movement and decision. After the exercise concluded, he approached her. "Impressive for someone who can barely hold a weapon steady," he noted, the sarcasm in his voice less pronounced than before. "Thank you, sir," she replied simply, offering no explanation for the discrepancy between her physical limitations and tactical proficiency. "Where exactly did you learn tactical extraction patterns at that level, Lieutenant?" he pressed. "Previous assignment, sir." "And what assignment would that be?" "That information is classified, Colonel." Mercer's carefully maintained control slipped slightly. "Nothing is classified from the commanding officer of this facility." Breyer met his gaze directly for the first time. "With respect, sir, some things are." The third mystery presented itself. What specialized training had Breyer received that was classified even from a base commander? And how did it relate to her physical condition and the incident at Indigo? The following morning brought the week's most challenging exercise, live fire qualification on the obstacle course. As Breyer prepared her equipment, she noticed something wrong immediately. Ammunition improperly loaded, sights misaligned. Without comment or complaint, she methodically corrected each issue, her trembling hands working with practiced efficiency. Mercer watched from the control booth, clearly expecting failure. His expression tightened with disappointment when she proceeded without protest, adapting to each challenge with quiet competence. During the exercise, the course operator increased difficulty settings for Breyer's lane only, targets appearing faster, cover positions more exposed. She adapted seamlessly, adjusting her approach to accommodate the heightened challenge while working within her physical limitations. At the final station, her weapon jammed critically, a malfunction too precise to be accidental. Rather than report potential sabotage, Breyer calmly field-stripped the weapon under simulated fire, identified a deliberately damaged firing pin, and completed the qualification using her sidearm instead. That evening, Mercer sat in the secure communications room, engaged in a video call with a superior officer whose insignia identified him as General Drayton. "I need everything you have on Indigo and on Lieutenant Reeves," Mercer requested. "That is still classified, Colonel. Drayton replied with visible discomfort. Why the sudden interest? I have reason to believe there is more to the official story, and she is here, at my facility. Who is there? The survivor, Briar Reeves. A long, waited pause followed. That is impossible. Reeves was medically discharged. Extensive nerve damage. Unfit for duty. Well, she is here, and despite hands that shake like she is in withdrawal, she is outperforming half my qualified instructors. Drayton's expression hardened. I will make some calls. In the meantime, Colonel, proceed with caution. There are political considerations with Indigo. After hours when most personnel had retired for the evening, Briar returned to the range alone. Under the harsh lighting, she practiced methodically, focusing on compensating for her tremors. Her determination was evident in each repetition, each adjustment, each adaptation to her permanent disability. Sergeant Major Halstead entered unexpectedly. Most people would have quit by now, Lieutenant. I am not most people, Sergeant Major. No, you certainly are not, Halstead agreed. I pulled your complete file. A significant pause stretched between them. And, Briar finally asked, 26 personnel lost in that fire. Official report says you pulled 8 out before structure collapse. Official report is incomplete. I know, Halstead said softly. I was station commander at Rhyolite when they brought in the survivors, all 3 of you. For the first time since arriving at Fort Halcyon, Briar's composed facade cracked. 3? They told me I was the only one. Exactly, Halstead confirmed grimly. They told each of you the same thing. The following morning, Mercer arrived at the facility earlier than usual, intending to review security footage from the previous night. To his surprise, he found Briar already on the range, engaged in what appeared to be a daily physical therapy routine. He observed from the shadows as she struggled through exercises clearly designed to maintain what functionality remained in her damaged hands. When she removed her uniform jacket to continue more strenuous movements, the full extent of her injuries became visible. Extensive burn scarring running from her hands up both arms, disappearing beneath her tank top. The pattern suggested she had reached repeatedly into flames, the worst damage concentrated on her forearms and hands. Mercer stepped forward, no longer able to maintain his distance. What really happened at Indigo, Lieutenant? Briar paused, studying him with careful assessment. With respect, sir, that is not a conversation to have on an unsecured range. An hour later, they sat in a secure briefing room with Sergeant Major Halstead. A classified file lay open on the table between them. Satellite images of a destroyed forward operating base, medical reports with graphic burn injury documentation, fragmentary witness statements. Briar pointed to the personnel manifest. 26 listed, but there were 32 of us at Indigo that night. That is impossible, Mercer objected, the colonel's earlier skepticism returning. Every deployment is documented. Not this one, Colonel, Halstead countered. Indigo housed a special access program. They did not tell us the full mission, Briar continued, her steady gaze holding Mercer's. They did not tell us what we were guarding. Which was? I do not know, she admitted. But whatever it was, someone was willing to burn 32 people alive to keep it secret. The implication landed heavily between them. Not an accident, not an enemy attack. Deliberate sabotage from within. One mystery resolved. Briar's hands trembled not from fear or incompetence, but from severe nerve damage sustained while rescuing colleagues from a deliberately set fire. Yet 2 new questions formed immediately. How had this cover-up been maintained for years, despite multiple survivors? And why had those survivors been systematically isolated from one another? Mercer leaned back, processing this revelation. If what you are saying is true, Lieutenant, why are you still alive? Why not eliminate all witnesses during the incident? They needed debriefing, Halstead interjected. Standard protocol for classified incidents. Extract all information from survivors before determining their disposition. And after debriefing, Mercer pressed. Administrative elimination, Briar stated flatly. Medical discharge for injuries sustained. Permanent separation from service. But you are still here, Mercer observed. Yes, Briar acknowledged. Because someone intervened, falsified my discharge records while processing my transfer to training duties. Someone wanted survivors in position to eventually compare notes. Halstead nodded. The same pattern emerged with all 3 survivors, officially discharged but quietly reassigned to different training facilities. each believing they were the sole survivor, until all three mysteriously received transfer orders to Fort Halcyon within weeks of each other. The tension in the room escalated with each revelation, the secure briefing room suddenly feeling confining rather than protective. The symbolic motif transformed. What had begun as trembling hands suggesting weakness now revealed itself as evidence of extraordinary strength, damaged but deliberate, trembling not from fear but from sacrifice. "Why here?" Mercer asked. "Why Fort Halcyon specifically?" Breyer and Halstead exchanged glances. "Because you are here, Colonel," Breyer finally stated. "Your signature appears on the transfer approval for all three survivors. You specifically requested us." "That is not possible," Mercer protested, genuine confusion evident. "I never requested any special transfers." "Someone used your authority to bring us together," Halstead confirmed. "Someone with access to command protocols but needing deniability." The implications multiplied, not just a cover-up of what happened at Indigo, but an ongoing operation using Mercer as an unwitting participant. The colonel's hostility toward Breyer had been anticipated, perhaps even engineered through the incomplete information provided in her file. Later that day, Breyer rejoined regular training activities, the dynamics subtly but significantly altered. Mercer's previous mockery had vanished, replaced by a careful neutrality that others noticed immediately. The other trainees watched this transformation with confused interest, whispering theories when instructors weren't listening. During tactical drills, Breyer demonstrated the same quiet competence, adapting each standard procedure to accommodate her physical limitations. But now, with context for her condition, her performance appeared even more remarkable. What had seemed like barely adequate now revealed itself as extraordinary achievement against impossible odds. Mercer observed from the sidelines, his assessment entirely transformed. Where he had once seen weakness deserving contempt, he now recognized determination worthy of respect. The realization that he had been manipulated into becoming an instrument of harassment against an injured hero filled him with professional shame and growing anger toward whoever had orchestrated the situation. After the day's exercises concluded, Mercer returned to his office to find an unexpected visitor waiting. General Parlin Drayton, his direct superior, and the officer he had contacted about Indigo. The general's unannounced arrival carried clear significance. "Colonel Mercer," Drayton greeted him with artificial warmth. "I thought it best to discuss the Indigo situation in person rather than over communications channels." "I appreciate that, sir," Mercer replied cautiously, suddenly aware that the general's presence might not be as straightforward as it appeared. "I understand you have been experiencing some personnel issues," Drayton continued, specifically regarding Lieutenant Reeves. "Nothing we cannot handle, sir," Mercer responded, deliberately vague. "I have reviewed her file," Drayton stated, producing a folder significantly thicker than the redacted version Mercer had been provided. "Her condition makes her unsuitable for instructional duties. I am authorizing her immediate transfer to medical evaluation." The pressure escalated instantly. What had been a gradual uncovering of truth suddenly accelerated into active intervention from above. Mercer recognized the implied order beneath the seemingly reasonable request: remove Breyer from Fort Halcyon immediately. "With respect, General, Lieutenant Reeves is performing her duties adequately despite her condition," Mercer countered, carefully watching Drayton's reaction. The general's expression hardened slightly. "This is not a request, Colonel. It is a directive. Lieutenant Reeves will be removed from this facility today. I have already arranged transport." The rapid shift from inquiry to action confirmed Mercer's growing suspicion. Drayton was not here to investigate. He was here to contain. The question was, why now? What had triggered this sudden intervention? "May I ask what prompted this?" "Decision, sir?" Mercer probed carefully. "That information is not relevant to your command responsibilities, Colonel," Drayton replied sharply. "What is relevant is that you have a lieutenant with significant medical issues who requires proper evaluation. I expect your full cooperation." The exchange ended with Mercer's reluctant acknowledgement of the order. But as Drayton left the office, the colonel's resolve solidified. Something far larger than a training facility dispute was unfolding, and he now found himself unwittingly at its center. That evening, Mercer convened an urgent, unofficial meeting in the facility's most secure location, the underground munitions storage area, where electronic surveillance was prohibited due to safety protocols. Present were Sergeant Major Halstead, Lieutenant Reeves, and the two other Indigo survivors Halstead had identified, Master Sergeant Orion Vale, an artillery instructor with burn scarring similar to Breyer's, and Captain Lysandra Webb, the tactical operations trainer, who walked with a slight limp from burn damage to her lower extremities. General Drayton has ordered Lieutenant Reeves transferred for medical evaluation, Mercer informed them without preamble, effective immediately. The news landed with immediate impact. Vale and Webb exchanged alarmed glances, while Breyer's expression remained carefully neutral. "This is the beginning of the elimination process," Webb stated. "It started the same way for me at my last posting. Medical evaluation leading to discharge recommendations. I have delayed implementation until morning," Mercer continued, "which gives us limited time to determine our course of action." "What are our options, sir?" Vale asked. "Limited," Halstead admitted. "Refusing a direct order from a general is career suicide at minimum, court-martial at worst. More importantly," Breyer interjected, "it would end any chance of uncovering what really happened at Indigo. If we move openly against Drayton, whoever he is protecting will simply disappear the evidence permanently." The cinematic rhythm shifted from urgent activity to contemplative stillness as the five officers considered their limited options. The underground storage facility, with its reinforced concrete walls and dim emergency lighting, created a fitting environment for their discussion, secure but isolated, protected yet trapped. "There is another option," Breyer finally said, breaking the silence, "one that requires significant risk." "Go on, Lieutenant," Mercer encouraged. "We force the truth into the open," she proposed, "not through official channels, but through public demonstration that cannot be contained or classified away." "What kind of demonstration?" Vale asked. Breyer outlined a plan that was as elegant as it was dangerous, using the scheduled facility inspection the following day as a platform for revelation. With General Drayton present alongside other senior officers and training staff, they would create a situation where the truth about Indigo would be exposed before too many witnesses to be easily suppressed. "The risk is substantial," Breyer acknowledged, "for all of us, but particularly for you, Colonel. Your career would likely not survive this." Mercer considered this sobering assessment. "And if we do nothing? Then the pattern continues," Webb responded grimly. "We get separated again. Evidence disappears. Truth remains buried." "And whatever happened at Indigo could happen again," Vale added. "More lives lost to protect whatever secret was worth 32 people." The decision crystallized in that moment. Career preservation versus moral obligation. Personal security against principled action. The setting itself seemed to reflect this conflict, the storage facility simultaneously representing safety and confinement, protection and imprisonment. "We proceed with Lieutenant Reeves's plan," Mercer decided, "but we need to ensure the revelation is undeniable. We need physical evidence beyond testimony." Halstead nodded in agreement. "I can access the complete medical files, unredacted reports showing identical injury patterns across all three survivors." "I still have these," Breyer added, removing her dog tags. The blackened metal caught the dim light, the damage consistent with extreme heat exposure. They belonged to Specialist Taryn McCullough. She was listed as on leave during Indigo, but she died pulling me from the communications center fire. She reached into her pocket, producing a second set equally damaged by heat. "And these belong to Captain Elias Winterbourne, also unlisted in the official manifest." Vale and Webb exchanged glances before each producing similar items. Personal effects from colleagues officially never present at Indigo, physical evidence that contradicted official records. As they finalized their plan, the facility's night lighting cycled automatically to its dimmed setting, casting everything in subtle blue illumination. The changed lighting created a visual shift that mirrored their transition from victims of conspiracy to active agents of truth. The symbolic motif of damaged but functional systems evolved further. What appeared broken could become a powerful tool when properly understood and deployed. The high-tension turning point arrived as they prepared to separate, each returning to quarters before their absence could be noted. Breyer paused at the storage room door, head tilting slightly as though listening. "Someone is coming," she whispered, her combat-trained senses detecting what the others had missed. They froze, the sound of approaching footsteps now evident to all. The secure storage area had only one entrance, leaving them no escape route if discovered. Discovery now, before their plan could be implemented, would end any chance of revealing the truth. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. A long moment of absolute stillness followed, time suspended in perfect tension as they waited for discovery. Then came the unmistakable sound of a key card being swiped, the electronic lock disengaging with a soft click. The door opened to reveal a figure none of them had expected. Lieutenant Commander Arden Thorne, the facility's medical officer. His expression showed no surprise at finding them gathered in a restricted area after hours. "I thought I might find you here," Thorne stated calmly. "We need to talk." Before any of them could respond, he closed the door behind him and produced a small device that emitted a soft hum, a field-grade signal jammer. "What I am about to tell you cannot leave this room," Thorne continued. "But you should know that General Drayton was not the commanding officer at Indigo when the fire occurred." He paused, ensuring he had their complete attention before delivering the factual shock that would irrevocably alter their understanding of events. "I was." Stunned silence filled the storage room as Lieutenant Commander Thorne's revelation landed. Briar recovered first, her trembling hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. "Stand down, Lieutenant," Mercer ordered quietly. "Let's hear what the commander has to say." "I was medical director at Indigo," Thorne explained, his voice steady despite the tension surrounding him. "Official records were altered to remove my presence there, along with several others. I've been tracking the survivors since the incident, working to bring you together." "You forged my signature on the transfer orders," Mercer realized. "Yes. I needed someone with your reputation for uncompromising standards to create the pressure that would force the survivors to connect. If I had simply gathered you all openly, the response would have been immediate containment." "Why now?" Briar demanded. "It's been 3 years." "Because General Drayton is being vetted for Joint Chiefs," Thorne replied. "Once he's confirmed, the files will be permanently sealed. This is our last chance to expose what really happened." Halstead stepped forward. "What did happen, Commander?" "Indigo wasn't a standard forward base," Thorne explained. "It was a research facility disguised as a military installation. The Special Access Program involved experimental combat enhancement protocols." "Human experimentation," Vale translated grimly. "Precisely. When preliminary results showed dangerous neurological side effects, I recommended immediate termination of the program. Drayton overruled me. The fire wasn't an accident. It was initiated to destroy evidence when inspection teams were inbound. This revelation accelerated the pace dramatically. What had been a gradual uncovering of conspiracy suddenly transformed into a race against time, with General Drayton's presence at Fort Halcyon now understood as active containment rather than routine inspection. "The inspection tomorrow," Webb realized. "He's not coming to evaluate the facility. He's coming to eliminate loose ends," Thorne confirmed, starting with Lieutenant Reeves. They spent the remaining hours developing a coordinated plan, now enhanced by Thorne's insider knowledge. As facility medical officer, he had access to secure areas and systems that would prove crucial to their strategy. Dawn broke over Fort Halcyon, the rising sun casting long shadows across the parade ground as personnel assembled for inspection. General Drayton arrived precisely on schedule, his entourage of aides and security personnel creating a bubble of authority that moved through the facility with practiced efficiency. Mercer greeted him with formal precision, betraying nothing of the night's revelations. "The facility is prepared for inspection, General. We'll begin with the training ranges as requested." "Excellent," Drayton replied, scanning the assembled staff. His eyes narrowed slightly upon noticing Briar still present among the instructors. "I thought we discussed Lieutenant Reeves's reassignment, Colonel." "Transport arrangements required additional time, sir. She'll be processed immediately following inspection." Drayton nodded, momentarily satisfied. The inspection proceeded through standard protocols, evaluating equipment, reviewing training methodologies, observing demonstration exercises. Throughout, Briar maintained her position, her hands visibly trembling, but her posture perfect, drawing occasional glances from the general. The critical moment arrived when they reached the main firing range. All personnel were present, instructors, trainees, support staff, and visiting officers, creating the maximum possible witness pool. "Colonel Mercer," Drayton announced, "I understand you have some exceptional instructors here. Show me." This was the trigger phrase they had anticipated, the general creating an opportunity to evaluate Breyer publicly, establishing grounds for her medical removal. "Lieutenant Reeves, front and center," Mercer ordered, exactly as planned. Breyer stepped forward, her face composed despite the stakes. Drayton studied her with careful neutrality, though subtle satisfaction showed in his eyes, believing his strategy was proceeding as intended. "Lieutenant Reeves, I was informed you had been medically discharged." "Evidently not, sir," she replied calmly. "Perhaps a demonstration of your capabilities, Lieutenant?" Drayton suggested, the challenge carrying undertones of assured failure. An advanced shooting course was arranged, with Drayton personally specifying parameters: distance targets, moving targets, and hostage scenarios. No time for preparation. The requirements were deliberately designed to be impossible, with significant nerve damage. As Breyer approached the firing line, her hands shook visibly, drawing pitying glances from those unfamiliar with her abilities. She removed specialized grip attachments from her pocket, custom modifications designed to accommodate her tremors while maintaining accuracy. The visual payoff of the trembling hands motif reached its culmination as she began the course. What had first appeared as weakness, then revealed as evidence of sacrifice, now transformed into a display of extraordinary adaptation. Each shot landed with perfect precision, despite her physical limitations, the tremors no longer concealing her abilities, but highlighting them. With each successful engagement, the audience's response shifted from polite observation to genuine admiration. The contrast between her visibly shaking hands and flawless accuracy created a compelling visual narrative of adaptation, overcoming limitation. The motif's complete transformation. Drayton's face darkened progressively as Breyer completed the course without a single miss. "Impressive adaptation, Lieutenant," he commented, voice tight with controlled displeasure. "Almost as if you've had specialized training." "Yes, sir," she confirmed. "Before Indigo." The deliberate mention of Indigo in public created immediate tension. Several officers exchanged confused glances, the classified designation unfamiliar to most present. Drayton attempted recovery. "A unfortunate tragedy, that fire. Equipment malfunction, as I recall." "No equipment malfunction, sir," Breyer replied, voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent range. "It was deliberately set." The assembled personnel reacted visibly to this contradiction of official record, whispers beginning at the edges of the formation. "Lieutenant," Drayton warned, "that contradicts the official investigation." "Yes, sir, it does." Mercer stepped forward, recognizing the planned escalation point. "General, I believe Lieutenant Reeves has evidence supporting her statement." "There is nothing to discuss," Drayton insisted. The Indigo incident was fully investigated and conclusions reached. The public twist reveal unfolded as Breyer removed her dog tags, holding them up for all to see. The blackened metal and warped edges were clearly visible even from a distance. "These belonged to Specialist Taryn McCullough. She was listed as on leave during Indigo, but she died dragging me out of the communications center." She placed the tags on a nearby table, then reached into her pocket, producing a second set equally damaged by heat. "These belonged to Captain Elias Winterbourne, also unlisted in the official manifest." On cue, Vale and Webb stepped forward from different parts of the formation, each placing similar items on the table. The physical evidence of deliberate cover-up lay exposed before witnesses too numerous to silence or dismiss. "Lieutenant, you are bordering on insubordination," Drayton stated coldly. "Actually, sir," Halstead interjected, stepping forward, "she's bordering on testimony." Halstead produced a folder from under her arm. "These are the complete medical records from the Indigo survivors. 3 personnel with extensive burn injuries and nerve damage sustained while pulling their teammates from the fire. All 3 were told they were the sole survivor," she continued. "All 3 were separated and monitored, and all 3 have found their way to this facility within the last month." Vale and Webb moved to stand beside Breyer, creating a powerful visual statement. The 3 survivors together for the first time since the fire, their united presence and similar injuries telling a story more compelling than any verbal testimony. The power reversal reached its culmination as Lieutenant Commander Thorne stepped forward. "I have additional evidence to present, General. As former medical director at Indigo, I maintain backup records of all research protocols and communications regarding the experimental program. Drayton's composure cracked visibly. "You have no authority to discuss classified programs, Commander." "The program was declassified this morning," Thorne countered, producing official documentation. "By direct order of the Secretary of Defense, following evidence I submitted regarding ethical violations and subsequent cover-up actions." The chaotic energy that had built throughout the confrontation began to shift. What had been a dangerous gamble transformed into authorized revelation, the confusion of accusations resolving into clarity of established fact. The power had shifted completely. Drayton's authority undermined not through dramatic confrontation, but through methodical exposure of truth. Colonel Mercer addressed the assembled personnel with newfound conviction. "These officers have served with distinction, despite devastating injuries received in the line of duty. Instead of recognition, they've been subjected to systematic harassment designed to remove them from service." His voice strengthened with each word. "As commanding officer of this facility, I cannot in good conscience allow this pattern to continue." Mercer turned to Breyer, making his position unmistakably clear. "Lieutenant Reeves, effective immediately. You are appointed head instructor for advanced marksmanship because of your unique adaptations to your injuries." To Vale, "Master Sergeant, your artillery accuracy computations will be adopted as the new standard training protocol." To Webb, "Captain, your tactical innovations have already saved lives in the field. Your methods will be incorporated into all future training scenarios." Then came the powerful symbolic gesture that transformed the moment from confrontation to recognition. Mercer saluted them, formally and with full military precision. "Your service has been exemplary. Your sacrifice is unrecognized. That changes today." One by one, every non-compromised officer in the room followed suit, rendering salutes to the three survivors. The visual power of this acknowledgement, rows of uniformed personnel honoring those who had been deliberately forgotten, left General Drayton isolated, his authority undermined by the moral clarity of the moment. In the days that followed, the system began its quiet self-correction. General Drayton was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. A congressional inquiry opened into the experimental program that had operated at Forward Base Indigo. Colonel Mercer received an official commendation for integrity in command decisions. On the training range where the story had begun, Breyer instructed new recruits, her hands still shaking, but her confidence absolute as she demonstrated specialized techniques for working around physical limitations. "Perfect function is not the standard," she explained to a class watching with rapt attention. "Perfect adaptation is, you will encounter situations where equipment fails, where conditions deteriorate, where your own body may be compromised. Your ability to adapt determines success, not your adherence to procedures designed for ideal circumstances." A recruit raised his hand, asking the question many wondered, but few dared voice. "If you do not mind me asking, ma'am, what happened to your hands?" Breyer considered the question without defensiveness. "I chose getting my team out over getting myself out," she answered simply. No dramatic narrative, no heroic details, just quiet acknowledgement of priorities that defined character more than any medal could. Vale and Webb joined her class later that day, each demonstrating different adaptation techniques developed through their unique challenges. The three survivors now worked as a unified training team, their combined experience creating instruction impossible to find in any manual. "Is it true you all served together before?" a recruit asked. "We served together," Vale confirmed. "We survived together, now we train together." Webb added the essential context. "Different injuries, same mission. Teach the next generation to adapt and overcome." The emphasis remained on continuation rather than conclusion, not an ending, but a new beginning built on hard-earned wisdom. At the graduation ceremony for the first class trained by the survivor team, Colonel Mercer addressed the assembled personnel with newfound conviction. "The measure of a soldier is not physical perfection. It is adapting to imperfection. Your instructors have demonstrated that limitations can become specializations when properly understood. They have redefined our understanding of fitness for duty." 1 year later, a new training facility was dedicated at Fort Halcyon, specially designed for adaptive techniques. The sign revealed its name, Indigo Adaptation Center, a formal acknowledgement of what had once been buried history. All 8 survivors, the remaining 5 having been located and brought in from various branches and facilities, now served as instructors, each specializing in different adaptation approaches based on their specific injuries and experiences. Mercer, now wearing General stars himself, addressed the opening ceremony. Today we recognize that our greatest resource is not perfect soldiers, but perfectly adaptable ones. After the ceremony concluded, Breyer remained on the range alone, practicing with her, still trembling hands. A new recruit approached hesitantly, uncertainty evident in his posture. "Lieutenant, I was told to report to you for specialized training." The young soldier revealed a prosthetic leg, recently fitted and still causing obvious discomfort. "They said you could teach me how to work with it rather than against it." Breyer studied him, recognizing the same fear and determination she had once felt facing an unfamiliar future with permanent limitations. The training hall echoed with the same fluorescent hum that had accompanied her first day at Fort Halcyon, but what had once felt exposing now felt illuminating. "The first thing you need to understand is that standard procedure was not designed for you," she explained with the quiet authority of lived experience. "We are going to create your procedure, one that works with your specific challenges." Her hands still trembled as she demonstrated the first adaptation technique, the tremors no longer a source of shame, but a credential more meaningful than any qualification badge. The symbol had completed its transformation from apparent weakness to visual testimony of strength. "It will not be easier," she warned honestly, "but it will be possible." The dog tag still hung around her neck, now joined by a new medal, recognizing what had always been true, regardless of official acknowledgement. No longer symbols of what was lost, but of what was gained, and what would continue through each life touched by her hard-earned wisdom. Have you ever known someone who turned their greatest challenge into their unique strength? Someone whose limitations became their specialization? The most powerful teachers often come from places of deep struggle, transforming what could have broken them into wisdom that lifts others. Their scars become credentials more valuable than any official recognition.